Have you ever wondered what became of MG42 crews who finally gave up after cutting down waves of Allied troops on open sand? Here's what happened to many of them, and a look at the lesser-known moments from the largest amphibious assault in history. First, the backdrop. When the MG42 entered service in 1942, it rapidly became the German infantry's workhorse machine gun. It went with them from North Africa to the Eastern Front and into almost every defensive position along the Atlantic coast. Its reputation, Hitler's buzzsaw, the terrifying rip of its high rate of fire, echoes through countless World War II accounts. But we're not here to recite specs or nicknames. We're focusing on the men behind those guns on D-Day and the fate many met once the battle turned. German doctrine aimed to smash any invasion before it could leave the water. Along the coast, they constructed Widerstandsnester, resistance nests, sited to interlock with one another, their cannons and machine guns lacing overlapping fire. Omaha Beach alone had roughly 15 of these strongpoints, many laid out to rake the shoreline lengthwise, ensuring that anyone slipping one arc of fire would be swept by another. A standard MG42 position was typically manned by three: the gunner, an assistant to feed belts and swap barrels as they overheated, and a third man hauling extra ammunition. Many crews had combat experience. By 1944, others were young replacements who had never been shot at. Whatever their backgrounds, their orders were straightforward. On the morning of June 6th, they were to keep firing until the beach lay empty, or die at their posts trying. What many did not grasp was that the very weapon that made them so feared would paint a bullseye on their heads. Allied planners anticipated those guns. They mapped the coastline meticulously, spotted camouflaged emplacements, and numbered many of the nests. On paper, the plan was elegant. Bombers and naval guns would pulverize the defenses. The landing troops would clear the remnants. Reality had other ideas. When the ramps slammed down, many machine guns were still chattering. The naval barrage before dawn was immense. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers hammered the fortified bluffs with thousands of shells. Yet reinforced concrete shrugged off direct hits, and numerous nests emerged intact. The Germans inside knew something enormous was coming. When they dared to look, the sight was unreal. A horizon crowded with ships and landing craft. British and Canadian beaches were supported by specialized armor, Hobart's funnies, that helped neutralize stubborn bunkers. On Omaha, American armor was supposed to include duplex-drive amphibious tanks. Instead, tragedy. Of 32 launched in the first wave, 27 sank. 5 reached the beach. Only 3 could fight, and those were quickly knocked out. The job of silencing the surviving MG42s turned into a slaughterhouse. German MG crews amplified the gun's lethality with tactics. A common method was mowing the grass, aiming low to shatter legs and drop men in the surf. Medics and would-be rescuers became additional targets. Another trick paired deception and precision. One gun would send tracers high to suggest its aim was off. A concealed gun at the correct height did the killing. Simple, brutal, and effective enough to catch many by surprise. As the first waves hit the sand, tidy plans disintegrated. Casualties mounted. Small groups moved on their own initiative, using whatever cover existed on a barren beach. Tank obstacles, shell holes, even the fallen. Training told them to dash during the MG42's brief pauses for belt changes or a hot barrel swap, and officers shouted at men to sprint in those few seconds. On one sector, a sergeant gathered a small team with a bazooka to assault WN-61, a strongpoint lashing the beach. They blasted a 50mm anti-tank gun supporting the MGs, crawled forward, and knocked out the machine gun posts one by one. In close fighting, they killed 7 defenders and destroyed 2 gun positions, losing 1 man and wounding another. That single action relieved pressure there and opened a way inland. Across Omaha, Rangers, engineers, and infantry clawed forward for hours. At Dogwhite, Rangers stormed a strongpoint under smoke and silenced its guns. On Easy Red, engineers cleared obstacles and carved lanes so troops could scale the bluffs and outflank the MG42s that had pinned them for so long. But reaching a bunker was only half the task. The decisive moments came at arm's length. Assault teams flung grenades and satchel charges into firing ports, then shot any survivors as they rushed in. Flamethrowers seared through embrasures, neutralizing the nests. Once the beachhead finally cracked, some German gunners, wounded, low on ammunition, or cut off, tried to surrender. Given the butcher's bill, not every white flag was honored. By early afternoon, however, the tide had turned. Pockets of U.S. infantry and engineers seized the high ground, destroying or bypassing the remaining nests. An after-action report from Omaha concluded that the bluffs were taken through the undaunted courage of infantry and engineers after the pre-landing bombardment failed. When the MG42s fell silent, the change was immediate. Beach exits opened, armor pushed inland, isolated footholds linked up, and the invasion rolled forward. MG42 crews would fight again in Normandy's hedgerows, but never so densely concentrated, and never again with a chance to halt the Allied advance in a single day. For the Allied infantry, facing an MG42 was pure terror. Many in the first wave had never been under fire. They heard the weapon long before they saw the beach. A tearing, continuous rip that veterans said could freeze your blood. When the ramp dropped, instinct said, lie flat and stay put. Leaders bellowed at men to move or die where they lay. The shoreline offered little shelter. Army medic Ray Lambert recalled rounds slicing the water, hitting men already floundering in the surf. On Dog Green, one company suffered nearly 90% casualties within minutes. Yet men still pushed forward, some from orders, some from duty, some because stopping meant certain death. From the other side of the sights, the view was different, but just as harrowing. On WN62 above Omaha, 20-year-old Heinrich Severloh manned an MG42 as dawn broke. He later described the armada bearing down as unreal. When the first craft came into range, he opened fire and kept feeding belts for hours. Nearly 12,000 rounds over roughly 9 hours. His assistant was gone. Comrades fell around him. It felt futile. No matter how many he hit, more kept coming. By early afternoon, with ammo gone and the position collapsing, he grabbed a rifle and ran, scrambling through craters and hedges until night. Surrounded the next morning, he surrendered, careful not to advertise that he had been an MG gunner. Many didn't get that chance. Some died in their bunkers, and some captured alive were astonished to be spared, given the carnage. The scars cut both ways. Veterans never forgot the MG42's fury. German survivors remembered the faces that haunted them. Textbook diagrams didn't capture the reality. Closing with an MG42 meant creeping to within meters under heavy fire. Betting your life the gunner wouldn't see you. More than a few fell steps from their target. Inside the bunker, fights were short, savage, and final. For MG crews, those were the dreaded moments. The same thick firing ports that protected you from the front trapped you when attackers got close. Hold out and be overrun, or try to surrender. Neither comforting. MG42 teams knew they were priority targets and feared reprisals. Most Allied troops abided by the 1929 Geneva Convention and took prisoners. Yet there are accounts of MG gunners being shot on the spot by men who had just seen friends killed. Professional detachment can be hard to summon in the seconds after a massacre. That uncertainty hung over every decision in those last breaths of a fight. Not every gunner was a committed Nazi. Some were conscripts from Eastern Europe, fighting out of fear more than loyalty. A few surrendered as soon as hope vanished. Others fought on, convinced surrender wouldn't save them. The mental strain was crushing, hearing footsteps above, waiting for the thud of a grenade. And when the end came, it wasn't always a relief. There are reports, rarely documented, of isolated reprisals during the Normandy campaign, especially against captured MG crews. Such incidents were seldom recorded, overshadowed by the triumph of opening a new front that would help end the war. Survival didn't erase the memories. Men like Severlo went home to farms and quiet towns, carrying a mourning they could not forget. He spoke little of Omaha for decades, then later reached out to families of fallen comrades, and even met David Silva, a U.S. veteran he had wounded. Two former enemies sat together, something unimaginable in 1944, and found a sliver of peace. Many German veterans led quiet lives, discussing the MG42 only with those who understood. For them, the weapon was both a professional point of pride and a private burden. In memoirs, when a writer says a machine gun opened up, they often mean the MG42. Films like The Longest Day and Saving Private Ryan kept its buzzsaw note alive, while the concrete bunkers along Normandy still stand, silent reminders of its power and the scars it carved on both sides.